This is what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object.
The newest update to Battlefront 2 has been out for a couple of days now, and in my opinion is one of the best content drops DICE has released so far. Each of the 4 new reinforcements are incredibly fun to use and breathe new life into the sequel era maps, which desperately needed some variety as they had mostly been neglected since launch, as dev time up until very recently was used to expand the Clone Wars era, something I think most of us really enjoyed. This latest update also brought the sequel trilogy to co-op, and the maps of that era worked so well for that game mode you really can't even tell they weren't made with co-op in mind. This update was much better than I ever expected, and I found myself spending upwards of 5 hours playing the game on Thursday, which is very unusual for me. I generally give myself a limit of 1, maybe 2 hours of game time in a single day before I need to start being productive. That being said, as I was playing the game on the day of the update, I kept noticing things that DICE had changed and features that had been introduced that DICE didn't tell us about. For whatever reason, DICE tends to release somewhat incomplete patch notes on a regular basis, where they leave out a few key changes, but this was another beast entirely, as this update made some huge changes the devs have yet to comment on. I have 10 in total that we're going to be going through, and those changes and new features range from star cards that have been quietly removed, 1 reinforcement that was taken out of the game entirely, a hero that DICE completely broke with this latest update, and a couple of cool Easter eggs that were just introduced. But first, I want to give a huge thank you to the sponsor for today's video, War Robots. As you guys probably know, in the tumultuous world of today where YouTube seems to be trying to kill creators at every turn, sponsors are very helpful in allowing me to spend enough time on the channel to bring you guys all the content you want to see. And after War Robots reached out to me, I really thought this game would be a great fit. War Robots is a really cool 6v6 mobile shooter that is filled with explosions, and you guessed it, robots. They hooked me up with a special link for you guys that will set you all up with an exclusive welcome pack that includes 400,000 silver, 100 gold, a full set of weapons, and even more. They are also currently in the middle of an event for the holiday season, so there is no better time to join the millions of players already playing. Use my link below to download the game. I would highly recommend it. Now let's get into those changes. Starting off, we may as well just get what I would consider to be the biggest unannounced change out of the way first, and this is the complete removal of the First Order Jump Trooper. That's right, if you hadn't already noticed, the First Order Jump Trooper is completely gone from Battlefront 2, it's no longer accessible anywhere in the game. When DICE first announced the First Order Jet Trooper last week, everyone on the Battlefront forums just assumed they would both be available for the sequel trilogy maps. After all, they are pretty much nothing alike, and every team has a maximum amount of total reinforcements of a certain class that can be deployed at one time anyway, so it's not like having more choices would make a difference. For example, the Separatists have 2 types of enforcers, the Droideka and the Super Battle Droid, and there is a limit imposed between both classes, so you could have all Droidekas, or all Super Battle Droids, or half and half. Either way, the limit is the same. However, that type of setup wasn't meant to be for the aerial class, and the First Order Jump Trooper, which you are currently watching gameplay of, no longer exists in the game whatsoever, and DICE currently isn't using the model for anything in Battlefront 2. A lot of people are very annoyed by this, not that it's really a huge deal or anything. The First Order Jump Trooper was always one of the weaker units in the aerial class, because for whatever reason, he had the SE-44C without the rapid fire attachment, which makes that blaster pretty weak, but as many are pointing out, it is odd to remove content from the game, and more variety is usually a good thing. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see the First Order Jump Trooper reintroduced or the model repurposed for something else in the future, but as of right now, it's gone completely. Speaking of the aerial class, all of the other aerials other than the brand new unit were hit with a pretty devastating nerf on Tuesday, as their 2 best cards were removed and replaced. Their jetpack cooldown star card that reduced the recharge rate of both jetpack abilities by 4 seconds has been replaced with a card called Evasion, which gives the jet trooper a 3rd dodge, and the rocket launcher cooldown star card, which granted the aerial a 10-second recharge reduction of their launcher, was replaced with Acquisition, a card that temporarily marks enemies who are damaging you, which all in all is a very weak star card compared to what we had. They made this change to accommodate the new jet trooper, which has a completely different style of jetpack and rocket launcher that weren't really compatible with those star cards, but in the process they heavily nerfed every other aerial. I'm not sure why they couldn't just change the card to have a different effect depending on which aerial is being used, but for whatever reason they just don't do that. They did the same thing when the Droideka was added a few months ago. They swapped out their increased grenade radius card with Acquisition because the Droideka just didn't have an explosive. However, in that case, if you used Acquisition, you did still get the increased radius for other enforcers. The card just doesn't tell you that and still doesn't to this day. In this case, however, those cards no longer reduce the recharge rates whatsoever, and both of those star cards are heavily inferior to what they replaced, so it's a bit of a bummer at the moment if you're trying to use any of the other aerials. I'm wondering if DICE is just planning to give all of the aerials across each era the new and improved jetpack. That would make the removal of those star cards and the First Order Jump Trooper more understandable, and would make each of those units much more powerful. Moving on from that, we have one more reinforcement change, although this one won't take long to discuss. If you didn't notice, the Wookiee Warrior has been removed completely from the sequel era maps. This is something the forums have been requesting for a long time. They seem to absolutely hate the Wookiee Warriors over there, probably because for the first year of Battlefront 2, the Wookiees were the only light side enforcers. They were the only option across all eras on every single map. Obviously, times have changed and Battlefront 2 has expanded, and the Wookiee Warrior is now relegated to only the prequel and original trilogy era. Next up, let's talk about Bossk. It seems like every update, at least one hero is hit with an unintentional nerf in the form of a bug, or just some accidental stat change. However, it usually isn't this drastic. Both Predator Instincts and the best star card Bossk has to offer have been completely broken. Predator Instincts has been cut down to lasting just 1/3 of its usual activation time, which is a huge hit. Before the patch, Predator Instincts had an active time of 24 seconds, now it's around 8. As you can see in the gameplay, when not firing, Predator Instincts will cancel out automatically after 1/3 of the timer has elapsed. This isn't something that only sometimes happens or is an occasional glitch, it happens every single time. Additionally, Multi-Traps, which is the card that allows Bossk to throw down 2 extra mines, and is one of, if not his very best star card, no longer works. Whether or not you are using the card, you will throw down 3 mines, which is his standard amount. Until this is fixed, this card is a complete waste of a slot, as unfortunate as that is. I can see why this wasn't in the patch notes because they obviously didn't catch it when they made some other changes to Bossk which didn't really fix anything, but hopefully these new bugs are fixed soon. Switching gears slightly, we have a really cool Easter egg that was snuck in on the weapon of the new Gunner reinforcement. If you go to the collection menu and inspect the Ovissian Gunner, you can see that on the side of the sentry gun, there is a small inscription of a Lothcat. These creatures were introduced during the first season of Star Wars Rebels, and more recently could be spotted briefly in The Mandalorian, which was really cool to see them in live action. It's cool to see that little Easter egg on the gunner's weapon, and if you're wondering, the Aurebesh lettering on the weapon spells out rotating cannon, which is an accurate description of the weapon in question. One very positive hero change I wanted to discuss was the fix to Rey's face as a part of her new appearance. For the longest time, Rey's face has been highly questionable. It always just looked off, not quite like Daisy Ridley, more like someone who wanted to look like Daisy Ridley and tried to have their face surgically reconstructed, and got close but didn't quite hit the mark. However, Rey's new skin included a much improved face model for Rey that actually looks like Daisy Ridley. They haven't updated the face on the old skins quite yet, although I would expect that to happen soon. I find it hilarious that Rey has always been the hero that looked the most off, yet Daisy Ridley is one of just a handful of actors that provided facial scans directly for DICE. However, I'm very glad to see they finally got this right, even if only for one skin, at least for now. The final few things we'll be discussing are relatively minor, but good additions. First, DICE added the ability to change the size of your kill message upon defeating an enemy. Just go into your gameplay options, and you can now set it to small, medium, or the default size, which is the largest, and you can also just toggle it off completely. This is nice. The HUD is relatively cluttered and obstructive at times, so any steps toward improving that is very much appreciated. The game also has been given a new icon to reflect the Celebration Edition, which does a much better job of representing what the game is today. For the longest time, the game had Iden front and center, which didn't tell you much about how far we've come since launch. I also wanted to point out that in the new co-op menu that allows you to choose which era and faction you want to play in, there is clearly some space left over on the right that is definitely going to be used for original trilogy co-op when it eventually arrives. I say eventually because I am pretty much fully convinced it's going to happen at this point. Our community manager even replied to a post pointing out this change yesterday, and it just makes it seem like it's going to happen. They've been teasing it, we have sequel and prequel, we're going to get original trilogy. Finally, something I wanted to point out about one of the new reinforcements that I originally missed is the Sith Trooper's special melee. The Sith Trooper has a standard melee where you just punch the enemy like anyone else, but if you do a run and then melee at the same time, the Sith Trooper will do a special karate kick. Unfortunately, it doesn't deal any extra damage, and it's way slower than the regular melee, but when I found this out, I was very surprised, and it's a neat little animation. Well guys, that is going to do it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, consider leaving a like as it really does help out the channel, and if you are new around here, make sure you subscribe so you never miss a future upload. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.